Hello, and welcome to our first episode of Tales of the Baseball slash Sporting World, because I'm throwing in a story of something that's not quite baseball. We are going to go back and I'm going to tell a couple of those stories when I talk about it in the video and I say, that's a story for another day or something like that. We're going to tell a couple of those stories, throw some other ones in that I haven't had before, and kind of just give you guys a little bit of fun and entertainment for the evening. So some of these stories are going to take place with my grandmother. He used to be the one to take me to baseball games, all stuff. My grandfather would go with us too every once in a while, but my grandfather was a very prolific softball player back in the, actually 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. And I guess I'll go into, I didn't actually have that story on my list, but I'll go into a couple cool stories I have with him real quick to start it off. So my grandfather played softball all throughout Orlando. He was an umpire. For years to come. Even when he was playing, he was still an umpire. He played several games against Eddie Feigner, who, if any of you guys are familiar with softball, you'll know exactly who that is. The king in his court. My grandfather played against him several times. Got a couple hits off of him. My grandfather was a very fast gentleman, punch and Judy hitter style. So he would, in fast pitch softball, which you can't really do in slow pitch softball, but he would lay down a bunt. He would get a couple hits, and he was fast enough to beat just about anything out. So they would take me to games, mainly my grandmother, because he was playing softball, in tournaments just about every weekend. So my grandmother would take me to these games. I would take my friends, like when I was a kid, and we'd go around autograph hunting. And I mean, we would go anywhere that people were signing stuff and go check stuff out. When I was a kid, I went and saw Michael Jordan play a couple of those games with the Birmingham Barons. I've actually had that picture in my video for the Chicago White Sox prospect, is a picture of Michael Jordan coming off the field at one of those games we went to. And I actually had my grandfather there at the game with me during that one. And like I said, he was a very popular sports figure, or local sports figure within Orlando, and umpire and stuff like that. And we actually got to go down to the batting cages while Michael Jordan was hitting. And my grandfather, God love him, he was trying to give Michael Jordan batting tips. And Michael Jordan was kind of blowing him off and was like, whatever, something like that. And actually, one of the guys that was standing there was actually, hey, you might actually want to listen to that guy because he knows what he's talking about. And I thought that was one of the coolest moments. I don't know that Michael Jordan actually listened to anything he said, but some guy that was down there helping him with the batting cages had said something like that. But anyway, so my grandmother would take me around to do these things and stuff like that. And one time we went out to City Walk, which I've discussed the story a little when I showed that card. We went out to City Walk to get the Chicago Cubs. We're out there signing autographs. Back when they had like Andre Dawson and Jerome Walton and Ryan Sandberg and people like that. And so we get out of City Walk, and most of the lines were actually surprisingly short. They were all, 20 minutes, 30 minutes to get an autograph. But the Ryan Sandberg line was about 3.5 hours if you had to stand on the Ryan Sandberg line. So my grandmother was probably the original Karen. I mean, she still kind of is, but she was the original Karen, and somehow just strolled us right up to the third spot in line with a 3.5 hour long line back behind it, and just strolled us up there and just walked right in line. No one stopped her. Nobody said anything. Someone came over and tried to say something, and she's like, no, we've been standing in this line the whole time. I don't know what you're talking about. So we actually ended up getting the Ryan Sandberg autograph, which was good because about an hour and a half after that, they cut the line off and made everybody at the end of the line, kind of peel off. So we were able to get a couple of Ryan Sandberg autographs, which I've shown in previous videos. So that was one of those stories, from when I was a kid. My grandmother just cutting in lines, didn't care, anything like that. This one was one where we did not cut in line. It was actually before the Ryan Sandberg thing, which may have prompted the Ryan Sandberg line cutting. But there was an old-timers game at Osceola County Stadium. Yogi Berra was playing in the game, a couple other guys, but that sticks out of my mind. I was probably 9 years old, 10 years old. What sticks out of my mind is that Yogi Berra was there, and after the game, like he went out in the third or fourth inning or something. After the game, people lined up outside the clubhouse trying to get Yogi Berra autographs, and we were probably about 30 people deep in the line, so pretty good chance to get an autograph. I mean, there's like 400 people in the line. We were like 30th in line. And so we get up there, and that day Yogi Berra decides that he is only going to sign about 29 autographs. And here I am, like a 9-year-old kid. I had Yogi Berra, like they had baseballs with some of the old-timer players on them. And I was trying to get Yogi Berra to sign something like that. And he just shut the door. Big steel door, just slammed it in my face. And my grandmother started pounding on the door. Pounding, until Yogi Berra popped his head out, and then she and him had some rather adult words at the time, which was pretty funny to see her and Yogi Berra. Now he still slammed the door in her face and walked back inside, and she pounded on the door a few more times, and then some security guy came out, and that was the end of our day at Osceola County Stadium. So that was one of those stories that I was like, oh, that's gonna stick in my mind for the rest of my life, which clearly it did. So some of the other stories are kind of are card related stuff like that, and this one actually is not my story. This is just a tale of the baseball legends. My friend Kendall and Johnny. Kendall owns Orlando Sports Cards down in Orlando, so go check him out if you're in Orlando or ever swing by there. Tell him Jesse the Body sent you. And Johnny, my friend Johnny, helped him at the card shop. Going through stuff and things like that, going sorting commons, things like that. Stuff you would do in a card shop if you're just there, kind of part time helping out, hanging out mainly. That's what we would all do, hang out at the sports card shops. But anyway, it was 1998. It was the chase with McGwire and Sosa. And at that time, and this is just a little story for you guys who, kind of throw your throw your cards in a common box and just forget about them. At the time, they spent days, probably weeks, knowing the two of them, digging through common boxes looking for Sammy Sosa cards, because they went from being a nickel a piece or a dime a piece or a penny a piece or whatever they were up to hundreds of dollars in some cases. It was like a leaf or something like that, And so those guys just sat there relentlessly digging through stuff and digging cards out, and that was one of the funniest stories that I've ever heard, just the amount of time they spent digging these cards out. But I'm sure it was quite profitable, and I never went into the details on all that. So, and that was just one of those stories that it's kind of a cautionary tale, like, don't forget about your comments, don't forget about your rookie cards you may just stick in a box and just forget about them for a long time, because I've definitely done that before. It's kind of similar to that, as I always tell the Christian Walker story, and I'll go into a little more detail of it than I normally do. I was sorting through, like I like to go through the stats, I like to look at the minor league teams, stuff like that. I saw Christian Walker, I think it's 2015 cards were, and this was a been right before Goldschmidt got traded from the Diamondbacks to the Cardinals. And, I was sitting there and I was looking, I was like, man, this guy just hit 29 home runs and hit 32 the year before and stuff like this. These big numbers for the minor leagues. And I was like, all right, let me see if I can dig up some of these cards and try to find some. And I looked, and I was surprised that they were $2. They were $3. I bought a 2015 Topps Chrome Auto BGS 9.5 for $22. And I was like, man, that's not a bad price at all. I'll definitely go on with that. Ordered a bunch of little smaller ones for $2, $1, $3. I never spent more than that $22 on that one, and most of them were all under $5 that I spent. So I was just hoping, he was 29 years old at the time, I think, or 28 or something like that. I was just hoping that he was going to get a chance to get called up. They didn't have the DH then, so I was just hoping that Christian Walker would get a shot. I was hoping either Goldschmidt got hurt, not that I ever want anybody to get hurt, or got traded. And so, sure enough, I think it was that winter, I think he got traded to the Cardinals. And then spring training, it was Christian Walker and Jake Lamb fighting for the first base spot for the Diamondbacks. And I, had bought all of those Walker cards, and they started to go up. They started to climb slowly. They probably went up like 1.5, maybe 2 times what I paid for them. Then Jake Lamb got hurt. He gets that opening day roster spot. Kind of all right the first month or so, I think. And I think it was about the second month that Christian Walker hit 8 home runs, 8 home runs in 9 games, and his stuff just skyrocketed. I sold those cards that I paid $22 a piece for one of them for $299 and one of them for $250. And then I sold a bunch of those little smaller ones, but I still have a ton of them. So I sold enough to made all my money back, plus some, and had a ton of cards still left over. I still have a BGS 9.5, but I think it's a blue auto Bowman Chrome. So I took all of those cards and just kind of set them away, because he slowly started tailing off, and then the next year he had a rougher year, and then the year after that last year was just rough for him. But I had that feeling. I don't know, sometimes you just get a gut, and you got to go with your gut on stuff when you're collecting cards. And I just had a feeling that he was going to put it together, at least for one more season, at least for a little stretch. Sometimes it's just a stretch that you need to be able to not dump some of your cards, but be able to get out from underneath some other ones you may be sitting on. So anyway, I decided instead of just sticking with the probably 30 or 40 ones that I had left, that I was going to buy some more before this season started. And to my surprise, they were all back down to about where I had paid for him when he was, still in the minors. And so this season, before the season started, I put all those cards in there, and now Christian Walker's hit over 30 home runs this year. His batting average is still horrible. He still strikes out a lot, but he is still knocking the cover off the ball. And I have sold just about every one of those cards for anywhere from 3 to 5 times what I paid for them. And a lot of people would have just dumped them, at the prices, especially after you made a profit. But sometimes it works out like that. Sometimes it doesn't. I can give you an example of I did pretty much the same thing with Corey Brown that played for the Nationals behind Bryce Harper, and he had a couple good years, and I was like, this is going to be the guy. This is going to be him. And I think that was 2011 Bowman, and I was like, oh, this is going to be the guy, and never happened. It just I bought Bowman Chrome Golds, I bought Bowman Chrome Autos, I bought Bowman, I bought whatever I could get of him, thinking he was going to be the guy. But again, I was only paying $1, $2, $3 at most, and maybe $5 for the autos, and I still have every single one of those. I've dumped a couple of them for like $1 for like 5 or 6 of them, but I have dumped every single, or I'm still sitting on every single one of those Corey Browns. Just about, I probably got 100 of them. I did the same thing with Mark Pryor stuff. I bought a bunch of his stuff cheap whenever he was trying to come back with the Padres. I got a 500 count box full of Mark Pryors that I'm just gonna, I just mix them in some packs and send them on their way when we have our charity things for our Arts and Recreation Council. So, but it's one of those things where some stuff's hit or miss, some stuff you got to sit on for a while. Like that Sammy Sosa example. I mean, he came out in 1990. It took 8 years and some questionable methods for him to become a superstar. So you never know. You just never know. Although I'm sitting on millions of comments that are never going to go anywhere. I don't think any of my 1987 or 88 tops are ever going to turn into something. But that's just one of those stories where you sit on stuff. I'm going to give you another one of my grandmother's stories that I've kind of touched on a little before, and that was kind of when we were at Osceola County Stadium, like the Yogi Berra thing, like I had said. We used to chase the players out of the parking lot, out of the clubhouse. There was a little clubhouse back there, all the players, and this was back before they had big team buses and stuff. A lot of the players would just drive to the games during spring training in Florida. It's only an hour, hour and a half, maybe the next place. They bring their own cars. Visitors, home players, didn't matter. So we would sit outside the clubhouse, me and probably 2 or 3 of my friends each time, and we would just fan out in the different rows. And I know it sounds stalkerish now to talk about it, and I probably would never do it again because I know that at the time I didn't think so. I thought those players were happy to sign some autographs, but they probably felt like we were invading their personal space. So to all you players, I apologize if some little freckle-faced redheaded kid came running after you somewhere in the late '80s at Osceola County Stadium. That was me. I probably got a picture with you, Rafael Ramirez, looking at you. But so, I mean, we would chase them down. We would hunt them down. My grandma would run back there with a camera. And if I could get a picture with the players, we would do that, me and my friends. That's what I was saying about Rafael Ramirez. I think I have 3 with him. Because I would always go when the Braves were playing. So she was big on that. And if a player wouldn't sign autographs or just ignore, she'd run them down. So it was, it was nice. It was good to have her to do that and chase me around, help chase me around for stuff. So that was another story of that. So this is probably what I'm going to call my biggest failure I've ever had, by far. And I don't know that was a failure. And I told my friend Johnny I wasn't going to put this story in here, but I'm gonna tell the tail end of it. And he's going to crack up because he's like, oh, you need to tell that story. And I was like, I'm going to leave it away, So I had bought in 2000. For some reason, I fell, and I've talked about this a little bit before too. For some reason, I fell in love with 2000 Topps Chrome football and 2000 Topps Finest football. And I went out. I mean, we would go to Walmart's. This was back when you could get hobby boxes at Walmart. We would go to Walmart's all over Orlando, driving around, picking up stuff, grabbing all kinds of things, whatever we could find, whatever product there was. And I would always buy that. Now, he would get better stuff than me. Better stuff in retrospect. I thought my stuff was cooler at the time. He'd buy like SPX or, Contenders or, something like that. But we would run around these Walmarts and you could get hobby boxes. You could get, mega boxes, blasters, stuff like that. And we would spend all night. I worked downtown. I didn't get off work till midnight or 2 or 3, and Walmart was about the only thing open. And we went to Kindle Store and bought a bunch of stuff too. So I was buying up all this product, buying it up, opening it, pulling Ron Danes left and right. I'm trying to think who else was in there. Peter Warwick. I got a couple of really nice Peter Warwick cards, but just stuff like that. But of course, my luck, the two products that I decided to purchase were the products from 2000 that did not have any Tom Brady's in them at all. So I ended up with, I think I've shown you guys one time, the only Tom Brady I've ever pulled out of my life was out of a Fleer Ultra box, and I don't even know where I pulled that. So I wasted probably thousands of dollars on buying Topps Chrome and Topps Finest and just sitting there and opening, which I love the open product, but and I got some really nice Ron Dane, BGS 10s that I had sent and graded through Orlando Sports Cards, and I was like, man, I'm killing it. Sean Alexander, that was another guy that was in there. I was like, man, I got all these Sean Alexanders and I got all these Ron Danes, and meanwhile these people are like, I got this Tom Brady guy, I don't know who that is. And that was just, I don't know that I could have known that or anyone would have known that, but a lot of people got lucky in that aspect, and I was not one of them. I chased Ron Dane and Peter Warwick, and in retrospect, that was not the best move. But to wrap up the story, the part that I was not going to tell, but I will share, is I had received a 2000, I think it was 2000 Topps Finest Joe Montana autograph, and this was in the early days of eBay. Let me clarify, this was the very early days of eBay when people would have to send you a check or a money order or cash, people would send cash even, through the mail. Then when you got it, you would send them their card without having tracking or anything like that going on. You just would send them their card, and they would just hope and pray they got their card. So I sold the Joe Montana Topps Finest autograph. Guy paid for it, or girl, I don't remember, and I mailed it off to him. About 3 or 4 months later, the card came back to me. So I went back onto eBay to let the person know, hey, your card came back to me, I was going to mail it to you. They were no longer on eBay. Couldn't get in touch with them. Their address had changed, so I don't know. As far as I remember, their check cleared or money order or whatever it was, I remember because I wouldn't have mailed it off. So then I sold it again because I was like, well, I'm never going to hear from this buyer. And so I sold the Joe Montana card again. And it got there, and it came back to me about 2 weeks later as refused. And so again, I went on to eBay to let this person know, hey, your card has come back. And again, not on there. They were gone. Their account was closed. That card had been refused, but their money had all cleared. So 3 times I sold this Joe Montana autograph. Again, early days of eBay. I sold this Joe Montana autograph, sent it to somebody. The guy sent it back to me and said, he said something like, this was not the card I ordered or something like that. And I had to refund his money back, which was fine. I mean, I'd already sold the thing 3 times. So I sent him his money back. And then finally, about 3 years later, when eBay got a little more in touch with stuff and a little more able to track stuff down and do stuff, I finally was able to sell that card to somebody that kept it or that hadn't canceled their eBay account and moved on to somewhere else. So I don't know if any of that constitutes me being arrested for a fraud or something, but there was no fraud to it. It's just, I don't know what the early days of eBay were. That was just craziness. And I was just learning how to be a seller, and I tried to do the right thing, and it just didn't, for some reason, people just were in and out of eBay so quick in those days. And some of it could have been a scam, could have been something, I don't know. I wasn't familiar with that stuff back then, and easily could have been, but I definitely sold a Joe Montana 2000 Topps Finest autograph 4 times. Same card, 4 times. Finally, the last guy kept it. I hope that guy enjoys it. 22 years later, I know I could track you down and say, hey, hope you enjoyed that card. So that's another story on there. I'm going to tell a couple other ones as we're going down here. I got a list of stuff. Just some of this really has nothing to do with me. I was not at the game. It was in 1983. I would have been a toddler. Well, not a toddler, but I would have been a very young child. I would have just been starting to play Little League Baseball myself. But I was not at the game, but it is one of the best games that I've ever seen. And if you guys can ever pull it up, I don't know if it's on YouTube, I don't know if it's on anywhere. I do have a VHS copy of the game, which is where I saw it. It was a Padres Braves game in 1983. And it was what traditionalists would call a real baseball game. It had 7 or 8 brawls in it, and I don't mean like like that. I mean like brawls, like bench clearing brawls. And so I believe Pascal Perez was pitching. I know Steve Garvey was there, man, because you can't miss those forearms coming out of nowhere. And this game had everything. There were players getting beaned. There were people out there, and it was just bad. It didn't matter. It didn't matter who was pitching. It didn't matter who was hitting. Pascal Perez went like 6 innings, and I think he hit like 4 guys. And it was just one of those games that just was unbelievable. I think Gene Garber or someone like that was up in the press box doing an interview. I'll have to go back and watch this game again if I can find a VCR. But he was up in the press box doing an interview, and one of the fights broke out. He broke his arm, had a cast on. One of the fights broke out. He came running out of the press box, ran down onto the field, and you see him jump onto the field. And the umpires are just walking around because it's getting so out of control. I mean, it's nuts. And the umpires are just walking around, writing down players' numbers, and then would try to break little fights up that were happening, try to break everything up and calm the whole situation down. But in the meantime, they're just writing down numbers. And so after each one would stop, the umpires would be like, number 12, you're out. Number 17 for that team, you're out. Number 8, I mean, they just be throwing out coaches. Gene Garber got thrown out, wasn't even in the game. I think it was Gene. I'm definitely gonna have to watch that again. But it was just one of the funniest things and one of the most, those games from the glory days that they talk about that Major League Baseball has cleaned up a lot with. It was just one of those games. And if you guys ever get the chance to find it, was I believe it was 83. Could have been 84, but I think it was 83. And it was a Padres Braves game, and Pascal Perez was pitching. If you ever get a chance to find that anywhere, it is simply amazing to watch. So my last 3 stories, I'm going to wrap it up on 3 stories. One is just a basic one, and then these last 2 are some of my favorite stories I've ever had. So when I was a kid, I've talked about this before, we used to go out to the elementary school that I went to. I mean, I was above elementary, but it was the elementary school that I had attended, which was right across the street from my house. And me and my friends would go over there, and we would have, basketball games, just the kids out there playing. And I played basketball in middle school, and it was probably around that time. I think so, yeah. And we used to have some players. There were a couple college guys that were out there that would come out there. Stacy Mack, they used to play for the Texans. He would be out there, every once in a while. And there was this guy named Alex. I can't remember his last name, but he played at like some college, like Colgate or something like that. Chris Anderson might be able to tell you better. Or Winthorpe. I don't know. He played somewhere. And him and Stacy Mack would just be out there dunking on each other. Stacy Mack was in high school at the time. He went to the same high school as I did, but he was a couple years ahead of me. He played for the Jaguars too. But they just be out there dunking back and forth. But every once in a while, you would end up as a little kid, if you were halfway decent at basketball, you'd have 9 guys out there playing a 5-on-5 game. They'd need somebody to come over and play. And so sometimes I'd be the guy that went over there. I was kind of taller than most of the other kids, and probably at that point I was a little beefier than the rest of them. So I would go over there and play some, but all the kids would get a chance to go over there and play. There were guys that shot better than me. There weren't many that could probably rebound better than me, but that's because I was bigger than everybody, at least in my age group. But there were a lot of guys that were better ball players than me and played better defense and shot and stuff like that. I just happened to be a little bigger. But anyway, so we would get in sometimes in the game. So Joe Oliver, who also had went to high school there in Orlando, would come out there and play, basketball with those guys, mainly during the off season, because this was still when he was with the Reds. I think one of the years we were out there was the year right after they won the World Series, because I remember him having a World Series ring. But anyway, so he would come out there and he would play ball with the guys and get out there and have a good time. And, every once in a while we'd get in a game where Joe Oliver and, you have to guard him or something like that. And it was pretty cool. But we started to kind of figure out that he was going to be there, at least 3 days out of the week, especially during the off season. And so, some of the younger guys out there, we all go dig through our baseball cards and take them out there. We thought it was the coolest thing in the world to come out there with a pen. And I was like, I'm sure, looking back again, I'm sure that he was not happy with signing autographs for us while he's out there just trying to play some basketball and hang out with everybody. But anyway, we still did it. So we still took all that stuff out there and still had him sign it. But now, again, I don't know that I would do all that kind of stuff. I don't take stuff to get autographed with me when I go to the games and things like that. And that's probably just something that I've lost in my growing older. But that was one of those cool things when you're a kid. There was a Major League Baseball player right there, and I was trying to play defense on him. He was just dropping jump shots on me like nobody's business. So that was just one of those cool stories that I've shared with on here before, kind of a little bit, and I just figured I'd elaborate on it a little bit and let you guys know why I have that extensive Joe Oliver collection. So these last two stories are going to be, I'm going to try to make them quick, but they are some of my favorite stories in the world. When I was working for the Kissimmee Cobras, I was the official scorer for the Cobras for 2 seasons. I think it was probably a season and a half because I started halfway through. It would have been when I was in college, like 2000, 99, 2000, 2001, somewhere in there. We were scoring a game. I'm not going to mention the player's name. I'm not going to call him out or anything like that, but we were playing a team. And this guy who ended up making it to the majors for a little while was very fast. He was a fast guy. And I'd seen him before. It was the second game that I had scored when we were playing this team. So I already knew he was fast. However, he hit a ground ball to third. And I believe Royce Huffman was our third baseman. I think so. And he kind of bobbled the ball and threw it over there and didn't beat him out. Like he bobbled the ball, dropped it a little bit, picked it up, threw it over there, but didn't get him. Like the runner beat him there. We're just going to call him the runner. The runner beat him there. And this would have been like when I was in college, like playing football, and like I was a bigger dude. I weightlifted. I was a bigger guy. So I gave it an error. Because Royce Huffman had dropped the ball and Pigpen. I think that's what they used to call him, Pigpen Huffman. But anyway, I think that's who it was. I'll have to think on that. I'll have to ask Kevin Baldinger. He might remember if that's who we called Pigpen or if it was somebody else. In a good way. Just because the guy would dive for every ball, would slide in every base, and he was filthy after every game. But I don't remember if that's who it was or if it was somebody else. I remember Charlie Carter was our first baseman. Brad Lidge pitched there, but I'm rambling off on a side note. So, ground ball, bobbled, beat it out, and I gave it an error. Which is great for our pitcher. I wasn't doing it for that. It was an error. I've scored several baseball games in my life, and it was an error. Like, if he would have picked it clean and thrown it over there, he'd have got him. No matter how fast that guy was. But I was sitting there in the press box. We'd moved on to the next inning, and the next time they came up to bat, the phone rings. And Kevin Baldinger, who was the PA announcer, now I think he works for the Orlando Predators. I don't know if he still does that or not, but every time I go to a Predators game, he was there. But Kevin had handed me the phone, and he goes, "Hey, it's the clubhouse down there." And I thought it was our clubhouse because I've never had the visitors clubhouse call me before. And so I pick it up, and I was like, "Hello," and it was that guy on the other end of the line. I didn't know who it was, but it was a guy on the other end of the line. And he goes, "Are you the official scorer?" And I was like, "Yes." And he goes, "That was a hit. I beat that out. I would have beat that out even if I bobbled a little bit. You need to change that to a hit." And I was like, "Well, I can't just change it. I guess I could, but I'm not going to. I don't think it was a hit." And he's like, "You better make that a hit or else I'm coming up there." And I was like, "Well, I'm not going to change it just because you threatened me. Like, that's just the way I see it. We can talk after the game if you want or something." But I was like, I still got to keep score up here. And, so all of a sudden, here I am, just sitting there in the press box. And this guy comes running up the bleachers, like out from the clubhouse, up the bleachers, gets about 2/3 of the way up and looks up there. And he goes, "Which one is the official scorer?" And he looks at me, and I stood up, and he looked at me. And now, I'm not all that big. I'm bigger. I'm a bigger guy. But this guy was only like 5'9", maybe 150, 160 pounds. And so I stood up, and at the time I was probably 6', 240. And I stood up, and he just stopped about 2/3 of the way up, and he just goes, "That was a hit, man." And I was like, "All right." And then he turned around and went right back down to the bleachers, got in the clubhouse. I've never heard from him after the game. Nothing. And I don't know if he was just running up there to try to scare me into changing it. And I don't know. It was just funny. And I always remember that guy just run up the bleachers. It was a minor league game. There was hardly anybody in the stands. There was maybe 200 people there. It was not one of our special nights, like when they had quarter beer, quarter hot dog night type thing. So I mean, he just ran ran right up there, and I didn't know if he thought he was going to fight me or if we were. But I was definitely not going to do that. He looked like he was a lot quicker than I was. So that was just a funny story where I was like, well, I'm glad I'm a bigger looking dude for a change where I don't have to tussle with somebody. Not that I would have, but it was just funny that somebody would think that they could run up there and get somebody to change the score. Funny part was, on top of all of that, after the game, the manager for the Astros, Manny Acta, he coached in the majors for a little while. Manny Acta called me down there, and I would usually, if they had some questions about stuff, I'd have to go to the clubhouse after the game, which I got paid a whole $30 to do those games, but it was just fun for me. I had a blast. And so I went down to Manny Acta's office. I was sitting in there for a little while when we were talking about it. And he goes, what happened on that guy that I'm not using his name's error? Which they would prefer that I give it an error because it looks better on their pitcher. And I don't know if Lidge was pitching or somebody else was pitching. It could have been Eric Ireland. I don't remember. Somebody was pitching. And I was like, I gave it an error, and then he ran up in the bleachers, and he was like, yeah, I saw that, and he's like, so you stuck with an error? And I was like, yeah, and he goes, good enough, and so I left it. It stayed as an error, and I don't know if I hurt that guy's batting average, but he made it to the majors anyway later on. Without, I hope that wasn't the one that kept him a game or two. So there was that story, and then this is my favorite story. I was in college. And I had gone to Tallahassee to see my friend. I talked about my friend that was the punter at Florida State. His name is Keith Cottrell. I don't think he cares if I spew his name on here because I will make him watch the video anyway. So we went to a WCW event. And we were there with the football team because he had got, the football team had got front row seats. I sound like I am a Ray Stevens. This is about to be my Ray Stevens Blue Cyclone. Which, if you've never heard The Legend of the Blue Cyclone by Ray Stevens, it is one of the funniest songs. My dad used to make me listen to it all the time, and I used to love it and crack up. But this is my Legend of the Blue Cyclone story. So we go to this WCW event, and WCW back then would like walk around and you sell liquor, sell shots, sell drinks, all that stuff. I wasn't drinking. I don't think he was either. I don't think a lot of the guys. I don't think those guys were. But just the fans in general and the atmosphere was kind of like that. And so we were sitting ringside, and they had a lumberjack match. I forget who was wrestling. I forget any of the other wrestlers that were there, except for Scott Steiner. Scott Steiner is the only one that I remember being there. And so they got the lumberjack match. All these guys are outside around the ring. And, I mean, the crowd was just giving them all the business. Just, calling everybody's names, and that's what I was talking about, the atmosphere. Like, they were just all on these wrestlers that were standing out there. Some of them were good guys, some of them were bad guys, and it was split up. The bad guys were catching the brunt of it. And this was before Scott Steiner got all the crazy, like chain mail stuff and all that. It was before that. But so they had this lumberjack match, and there's Big Papa Pump just standing right in front of me, and the whole audience is giving him hell and just going at him, and giving Scott Steiner some hell too. Well, my friend Keith, although he'll try to deny it, he was also jumping in, talking about how bad Michigan was, and some people over here, not Keith, some people over here were talking about Scott Steiner's mother, and then Keith is just talking more trash, but a little calmer, like not as bad as some of the audience. It was mainly like college stuff, or just something to kind of get under his skin, or something like that. Well, somebody said something. Keith will swear to you it wasn't him. I don't know who it was. But I was standing up on the rail. We were all standing on the rail. There was like 15 people standing up on this rail. Like half of the Florida State football team, myself, a few other people were all standing up. Somebody said something. I'm not going to blame anybody. Somebody said something. I know it wasn't me. I didn't say it, but somebody said something. And Scott Steiner turned around and looked at me like I had I had just John Wicked his puppy or something. I mean, he just gave me this look. And at the moment, the split second that man turned around, everybody else sat down. So when he got all the way around, I don't know why they all decided to sit down in unison, but everybody sat down. So when Scott Steiner turned around, the only person left standing on that rail was me. And he had this look in his eyes like I would have brought his puppy back if I could have. Because he came running at me full speed. Full speed. And I couldn't move. I was like petrified. I was like, it's gonna be the end of it. I'm either not going to be here anymore to enjoy this, or this is going to be my wrestling company if I do somehow make it. And so Scott Steiner gets about 2 feet away from me and like cocks back, and I'm like, oh, I'm about to be that guy. That's going to be it. And I couldn't move. I was just standing there staring at him. And luckily, 4 other guys that were in that lumberjack match saw him spin around and like saw the look in his eyes. Again, I don't know what was said or what somebody yelled, but it was not the right button to push. And those 4 guys just ran over, grabbed him about a foot from me. And I almost peed a little bit. And so they pulled him back and they took him back. Like 3 of the guys went back with him out of lumber, and they sent out a couple more guys to fill in those spots. But I thought that was going to be the end of it for me. And so that is going to wrap up my stories for now. I have a few more. I wish I had a life that had hundreds of stories, especially that were sports related, but I don't. But those were some of those. I made a little list, and I hope you guys found them entertaining. I'm going to try to do maybe 1 or 2 more of these down the road in the middle when I'm working, trying to work on other stuff. I've been slacking on my teams in the minor leagues, but I kind of got all hung up with some of the trade deadline stuff and now the September call-ups. So I'm trying to mix and match players and get everything right for you guys. So I will have that coming up soon, but I wanted to make you guys a video that, was kind of entertaining, and I hope you guys enjoyed my stories. I know they kind of start off slow and end up big, but if you guys have any questions for me, because some of these were questions when people ask me, oh, could you tell me about that story, or what's your favorite collecting story or something like that. Those are some of my kind of fun sports stories, and I'll come up with some more. I've got plenty of football stories, and I've got some baseball stories, from when I was a kid, and probably a basketball story or 2. So I hope you guys enjoyed that video. I'm sorry it wasn't as baseball related as most of the stuff, but go ahead and like and subscribe if you enjoyed it and you want to see more content. Not all going to be like this, and I'm not always going to wear the mask, but I will wear the mask for my tales of the baseball and sporting world. So I hope you guys enjoyed it.